Welcome to Y'all Ain't Right, a podcast about Mississippi politics with Robert Johnson and Brandon Jones. On today's show, we'll be discussing a chaotic special session, the tragic death of a teen on the Mississippi Gulf Coast, why the Watson part of Watson versus RNC is not happy about winning that case, and what Lindsey Graham taught us about the modern Republican Party. Y'all Ain't Right is proud to be sponsored by Chisholm Strategies, a leading direct voter contact firm rooted in the South. With decades of experience helping campaigns from the courthouse to the White House reach, persuade, and mobilize voters. Well, made it through the first 30 seconds, Robert. How's it going?
It's going pretty good.
Yeah.
I'm glad you did that.
Yeah. We may have to decide if we're going to trade that back and forth. But for today, I'll be our guinea pig. Robert, we're doing a podcast. There are millions of these. What are we doing here?
Well, you and I have been prompted to do this for quite some time.
Yeah.
But, we kept putting it off. You were busy in your law practice. I was busy in my law practice. And so finally we got some time. And it's ridiculous in the state of Mississippi and the country for that matter that we had to do something.
Yeah.
So it's a good timing.
It feels right. There's no lack of weird, chaotic mess to talk about. It does cause me, though, to think about the course of our relationship. And I was thinking about it almost goes 20 years. I don't know if you're aware of that. We're almost 20 years into this thing. I was thinking back to my first days of meeting Robert Johnson, one of the best dressed in the Mississippi legislature, 100%. That was one of the first things that came off. Probably not the best dressed. Ed Blackman still existed.
Yeah.
I remember in our earliest days, we were in the middle of one of the most contentious speaker fights in recent memory, one that was like closely divided. And I remember a little intimidation factor. You were serious. You had been around. You were ornery, my friend.
Yeah, I was an asshole. I'm still an asshole. Nothing much has changed. The difference is you're not there. And a lot of people that I like and got along with, we would talk every day. Once you got past the point of realizing I wasn't angry, I was just frustrated. Not a whole lot has changed. We're still fighting some of the same issues. But our friendship developed during that time because after we got through that contentious period, we began to do a lot of good work.
It was clear to me pretty early on that you brought a level of seriousness and perspective to the process that was needed. And so it was always fun working with you. It's been fun working with you on other projects since then. I'm looking forward to this. One of the things I'm most excited about is getting to hear you talk about some of these prevalent issues on a weekly basis. We do that a lot on our own, but it's going to be fun to have these conversations and share it with others because as we survey the landscape, and part of why we're here is the point that there's not a lot of shows or any shows doing what we hope to do with this, which is to talk about a variety of issues from a Mississippi perspective.
Well, not just from a Mississippi perspective, but it's got to a point now, when I was young, I would read newspapers, and I got older, I'd read 2-3 newspapers, and I could trust that I was getting the news. Reporters were giving me facts. Now I have to read 5 or 6 different sources and try to put things together that make sense because it's hard to know what's real anymore. But one of the resources that have been good for me have been podcasts where people actually talk about what's going on because they've been there or they're involved in it or they don't have an agenda. They just want to talk. Now, people would say I may have an agenda because I'm a Democratic caucus leader in the House. But what I hope to convey is that there are facts that people don't talk about. But more importantly, we can talk about these facts in a context that the general public doesn't usually get.
Yeah. No, I'm excited about it. Well, look, let's get into it. You just wrapped up a fun week. Last week, Governor Tate Reeves summoned legislators to the Capitol for a special session to address the state's youth court system. Lawmakers had less than 24 hours to pack a toothbrush, read a 200-page bill, and make it to Jackson, where, from what I could see, y'all sat around most of Wednesday before the Senate passed its version of the bill late Wednesday night. House's turn on Thursday, right when it looked like y'all might reach an agreement on Thursday afternoon. The House Speaker decided to add pharmacy benefit managers to the conversation. So, look, I texted you Thursday. I asked you if y'all were finished. You said, no, I'm working on an amendment.
Yeah.
Tell us what happened.
Well, see, this is what I mean about facts and getting your news in the right place.
Yeah.
You said 3 or 4 different things. Yeah, let me get one of the things you said last week, the governor no, he didn't call a special session last week. He called us to be in a special session on Tuesday evening and be there on Wednesday afternoon.
Oh, I'm sorry. This is coming out on Wednesday of next week. That's why I said last week.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's get the timing right. You're right. Last week he did. But he called it on Tuesday. We had to be here on Wednesday at 3.
Yeah.
And we probably would have been there earlier, but a lot of people were out of town at conferences. So we was trying to get them there. We still in the House, we have 122 members. We probably had about 30 people that didn't show up, but we had a quorum. We had enough to have a quorum. About this bill, so it was on reforming the youth court, 216-page bill. And I know there's some fast readers out there. It's one thing to read something and be able to digest it, and then you have to go back and do some research, look at the old statute, see what the changes are. It's really not enough time. And then we have this issue of people who are working on the bill saying, we've been working on this bill for 4 years. Well, there are 122 members in the House, 52 members in the Senate, 5 people from each house working on something. And the first time you see it is the day or 3 or 4 hours before they introduce it. It's a little much, and I think it's a little callous when you're talking about reforming a whole court system. And we're talking about a court system that deals with children.
Yeah.
So
82 counties,
yeah.
Really 82 different systems. I know part of the effort was to get a more unified approach. I know part of the effort is this system has been closed off for a long time for folks like nonprofits that have tried to observe what's happening. I have a particular interest in our children not ending up in the delinquency stage of the legal system while their education is ongoing. So we have a lot of kids that are ending up in the school to prison pipeline. The youth court is an important fulcrum in that. So there's been some interest in getting just a little bit more access to what's happening in these courts so that those children can be better serviced. So you had that piece of it. You had the piece of it that with a piecemeal system, you have some chancery court judges that are hearing these cases. Some court systems use referees. Some have dedicated youth courts. So it's kind of different depending on which part of the state you're in. I know y'all added $30 million to the system. I know that the understanding now is that counties are going to have to kind of adopt that sort of uniform system if they want to be a part of it. At the end of the day, how did you feel about the product? I mean, I know the bill was long. I know that there's still things that we probably are going to learn about exactly what we did in the weeks and days to come. But how do you feel about it generally, just with where y'all landed?
Well, I don't ever feel comfortable passing something of this volume without being able to spend some time with it. What was not incorrect, there are people who have been working on this for some time, but this is the problem. There are people who are working on it, but don't work in youth court every day. Yeah. But we have youth court judges. We got people who served as referees. We have prosecutors. We have lawyers. We have child care advocates or juvenile justice advocates that understand the system. And I just don't think there was enough input from them. Now, let me say this. Reform is needed, and uniformity on some scale is needed. We are a multifaceted state. Something that works in Natchez may not work in Clarksdale. I understand that. But with the input from the judges and the prosecutors and the advocates who work in this field, more input for them would be fine. Now, they relied a lot on the governor's office and administrative office of the courts. Those people don't work in youth court. Probably 60% of this bill was really, you don't need to make any changes with it. The family forum part of it, where they employ people in the community and different advocates to talk about what needs to happen. Having a full-time judge, which we can talk about, which is a little bit disingenuous. For instance, in Adams County, they're going to give us an extra chancellor. They're taking away our county court judge, not actually taking away. They give you an option. If you want to keep your county court judge, you're going to have to pay for it. These other judges are paid out of the state general fund and through the administrative office of court. But just to simplify this, we get judges and we spend in $9 million to do extensive renovation and create more beds at Oakley. They call it Oakley Development Center now instead of Oakley Detention Center. But there's no development in this bill. There's no money for mental health. There's no money for extra education. All the things you need, the services you need to help rehabilitate and get these kids back on their feet. But we put money into creating beds for detention. We should say that there's enough money here to buttress 2 youth detention centers. And Mississippi's history of youth detention centers is very checkered. It's been under litigation for decades. We don't seem to know how to do confinement in Mississippi. And this is yet again. We don't do confinement because it's not about confinement. It's about money. You don't put money into mental health, but you put $9 million to build more rooms and beds at Oakley. That's somebody has a contract to do some building. Nobody makes money doing social work or psychiatry. Nobody gets money doing that. And we need to refocus and think about people as opposed to mechanisms and data. That was the thing that we spent a lot of time arguing about. To that point, when you called me and asked me, how's it going? I said, I'm working on an amendment. My amendment that I knew wasn't going anywhere was sparked by the fact that the governor got on television and said, I care about children, I care about our youth, and we want to do something. This is why this bill is so important. And my amendment said, well, we won't spend any money on this bill until the governor starts taking the $38 million for a summer EBT food program for 320,000 Mississippi children who really don't get an adequate meal anytime during the summer because they got free lunch during the school. That's $38 million that's not his money, but the federal government has available to him. In the last 3 years, we've turned down over $114 million for some highbrow idea that we're creating a welfare state. Hell, we the poorest damn state in the country. We're between 49 and 50 all the time. And the only way you're going to do any better is by fortifying our communities, helping children, and meeting them where they are. And he refused to do that.
Well, that's well said. And we're going to be talking about this. I mean, we're going to be touching on this system and we'll be kind of evaluating how it goes. That's a good education for me.
Do I feel like I'm touching on it?
No,
I'm beating the shit out of
yeah, well, you do. I mean, you're hitting it just right.
Yeah,
and these are the things that people need to know. So look, this is a serious topic. You and I have talked about this a lot. There's an active investigation into the death of an 18-year-old Jackson County student named Nolan Wells. We're now in the second week of this investigation. Wells was found on Horn Island after July 4th weekend. WLX has reported that results from an independent autopsy were expected to be released Friday. That hasn't happened. Attorneys are saying it was delayed because of, various reasons. Look, theories have circulated on social media. This has been a topic of conversation outside and inside of the state. How is this all landing with you?
Well, first of all, it was a tragedy. And the next most important thing is that we should be somewhere, wherever we are, wrapping our arms and our prayers and all of our thoughts with this family that has lost his child. What doesn't sit well with me are people on social media on something this important and this tragic, speculating, making things up, drawing conclusions based on facts that don't exist. And so that's what I don't like. And the other issue is Mississippi has its problems. And it has a colored racial history, and we continue to have a racial issue in this state. But nobody black is asleep at the wheel in this state. We have strong advocates. We have people who are well-versed in the law. And I think this family needs all the support and help we can get. And I'm happy and excited. When I say happy, I'm glad that the system is getting help. The outside help I do appreciate. Independent autopsies, lawyers who will lock arms and come in this state and bring resources that will help get this done. But you and I practice law, and I did a lot of criminal law early in my career. No investigation is over this fast. And so you can't, whatever you may think about what's happening in Jackson County, there's work being done. And until some conclusions are reached that don't make sense, or somebody tells me we didn't find anything, let's just cool our heels a little bit and do what we can to support this family. And I want to say one more thing. I don't do the getting in a boat with a case of beer and driving across the expanse of the ocean for 10 miles to go to an island where nothing exists. I don't understand that culture. That's for somebody else.
Yeah, that's part of my culture.
That's
my
some of your
home
culture.
county. Yeah.
But what I do know is that some of the people are commenting on this like there was just this one black kid and 3 white kids on a boat and they went to an island. Now, this is the 4th of July, and you tell me if I'm right. There were a couple of hundred boats probably out there, 1,000 or maybe a couple of thousand people. And so this was not a one-off thing.
Yeah, probably not quite that many, but just for context, I'm in my 40s now. When I was in high school, I spent probably 20 plus days on Horn Island.
Okay.
In the summer. It's since then become a more popular spot for folks to hang out together. And I guess it always has been in some form or fashion. But I think sometimes when people hear about these barrier islands who live inland, they think it's kind of exotic and it sounds kind of strange. This is actually a place where people gather to party. It's where people gather to hang out. And so I think this was a pretty common part of life there on the Gulf Coast, will continue to be, I'm sure.
But the important thing is that we're not just a handful of people. Whatever happened to this young man, somebody saw it. He wasn't isolated by himself. That would be my thinking. And so I would just ask people to stop spreading rumors, stop drawing conclusions, and, pray for this family, send them your contributions. They may need those resources. And let's be prepared when the real fight starts to deal with the issues as they come.
One of the things that you and I have talked about, and you've helped me to get educated on over the course of our life in relationship together. I mean, This lands differently with a black man than me hearing it as a white guy from the coast. I mean, I'm imagining you have some thoughts on getting into a boat with 3 white guys
Nah,
or going hunting with 3
hell
white
no.
guys.
That's not getting to
But
happen.
it's important for people to know
Look,
that, look, your perspective is going to affect how you look at these stories.
I hunt, I fish. I have 3 adult children, but if they were growing up and if my son came home and said, hey, Dad, Jim and Billy Bob and whoever else, they're getting ready to go fishing. And I said, well, who's going? And if it was only him, he was the only black guy, he's not going. And I don't say that in jest. That was our culture. If you talk to any black family anywhere, they would say, now don't go anywhere by yourself. Take somebody with you. And that would mean if you're the only black person, don't be that person. I'm not going in the woods with 8 or 9 white guys with guns. Not because I think somebody's going to try to kill me. I got to have somebody who's with me.
And I do think there's a generational element to this. There's a racial element to this. I think some of us white people can tend to be dismissive of that perspective because we don't think about some of those things. It's, we may laugh off that perspective, but the truth is, if you're a black parent, how can you not think about that? Now, It sounds like it was more common there. The coast has always been a little different.
Yeah,
it's always been a little bit different.
It's still different in most areas.
But I think it can be important for people who look like me. It can be important for people who look like me to realize that a black parent is going to look at these things in a different way. Black people who live inland who are kind of thinking about this story and imagining how they would respond, that's going to land a different way.
People draw these conclusions because it doesn't make sense to them.
Yeah.
And so we're going to take our time with it. But our prayers and our support and our money and anything else we can do is with that family down there.
That's right. We're going to be praying for them and following this story. And we'll come back to it. It's a tragedy. It's awful. There's no part of it that isn't sad right now.
No, but we're going to stay on top of it. And we will, the next time we get together, we'll be talking about it again.
Yeah. So, look, on June 29, the U.S. Supreme Court issued its opinion in Watson versus the RNC. The Watson part of that is our Secretary of State, Michael Watson. In a 5-4 decision, Justice Amy Coney Barrett wrote the opinion holding that Mississippi's law allowing election officials to count ballots postmarked by Election Day would stand so long as they were received within 5 days of the election. She noted there's no federal prohibition against that. This is the way that absentee voting has worked for a long time. According to Super Talk, Michael Watson said it wasn't a fun case to take. Quite frankly, a lot of folks said, nah, we're not going to do that. But I felt like Mississippi needed to do the right thing. Some stuff to parse through there. Listen to this, Robert. Immediately after the ruling, Governor Tate Reeves tasked the Republican-led legislature with coming up with a plan to repeal the late arriving ballot law instead of accepting and counting ballots that arrive 5 business days after the election. Reeves said mail-in ballots should be received by the voter's respective circuit clerk by 5 p.m. on election day for the vote to count. Otherwise, it should be nullified. So look, you know about all this stuff. You've been there for many iterations of our absentee ballot law. For a state that doesn't have any early voting and that has the toughest absentee voting laws in the entire country.
That's right.
I'm hearing this and I'm thinking, well, here we go again, more restrictions. Our Secretary of State is saying, I kind of did. I'm not thrilled with the outcome. We've got a governor who's saying we need to repeal this. That just strikes me as a Mississippi voter as here we go again. We're going to restrict voting rights yet again, even though about less than a third of our state's population participates in your average election.
The leadership has a political philosophy that is in their benefit. The fewer people who vote, that's the best thing that can happen. And clearly, our president thinks the same thing.
Yeah.
And this position that the Secretary of State is taking and the governor is taking is fueled by President Trump and all this elections are rigged talk that he does. And part of that is what we talk about.
We weren't great at elections beforehand.
No.
But now that we've got a chief administrator who casts doubt on every single corner of election, it's made it a lot different.
Right. Because one thing that the Secretary of State acknowledged, and one thing that Justice Coney Barrett said in her explanation, this is a Mississippi law.
Yeah.
The federal government doesn't regulate anybody's election. States can choose to do what they want to do. But if the absentee law getting in 5 days after the election was a problem, we have a supermajority of Republicans in our legislature. It's House and Senate, a Republican governor, Republican Secretary of State. If they wanted to change, they could have changed it. But look, everybody knows how restrictive our voting laws are. And Republicans themselves understand they need more people to come out to vote. They don't really need any more restrictions. But it was laughable that Secretary of State Watson said, even though he was a defendant in the case, said, I didn't agree with that ruling. Well, hell, you tell your lawyers to come home and leave it alone. I mean, it makes no sense. It was just a contradiction that didn't make any sense. And if the governor felt that strongly about it, while he is calling these last minute special sessions, he could have called us back any if he has the votes to change that law.
Well, we don't want to become an idea factory for Tate Reeves. So I would like for them to leave this one alone.
I don't think they want to do anything with it. Talk of this.
South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham died on July 11th from an aortic dissection. He had just gotten back from Kiev, where he was apparently working on additional aid for Ukraine, which, I'm really happy somebody was working on that. He served in the South Carolina House of Representatives for one term beginning in 90. Then he went to Congress, where he represented the 3rd District in Congress for 4 terms. And then in 2003, you probably remember this, he succeeded Strom Thurmond in the U.S. Senate.
Yeah.
Son of a bar owner. He was a hawk. He had an extensive foreign policy record, close friend of Senator John McCain, and considered one of the deal makers. We don't have a lot of deal making going on. In fact, Congress does very little now.
Yeah.
There's not much they can agree on. But he was one of the people who was perceived as someone who had that talent for getting things done. I wanted to point this out, though. His relationship with President Trump, interesting to say the least. In 2015, he called Trump a jackass after Trump criticized McCain for being a POW. That same year, he said, Trump is a race-baiting, xenophobic, religious bigot. He doesn't represent my party. I don't think he has a clue about anything. He is empowering radical Islam. You know how you make America great again? You tell Donald Trump to go to hell. I got a few more. He added, I'd rather lose without Donald Trump than try to win with him. And in 2016, he tweeted, if we nominate Trump, we will get destroyed and we will deserve it.
Well, he was right about that.
Yeah. He went on to become, and this is, there's some great articles on this. Jonathan Martin has one in Politico. Slate has written one. The Bulwark has studied all this. Suffice it to say, he went on to become one of the president's biggest supporters. Earlier this summer, after the president endorsed him in his current campaign, he said, Mr. President, you are not far behind God.
Yeah,
so
I remember that.
Big swings in the relationship.
Yeah.
And I guess I was looking at this. Look, he is an interesting figure. There are some laudable parts of his story, and you can see some instincts towards standing up to Trump. But here's a guy who was the most outspoken Republican against the president, who eventually kissed the ring, bowed down, was willing to embarrass himself carrying Trump's agenda and trying to develop that relationship. And I was thinking of this as kind of a personification of the Republican Party. Any of those friends of ours, any of those representatives who had any instinct towards standing up to this, they've kind of either all fallen in line or they've gone away. And we've certainly seen that here in Mississippi. So that's kind of, I wanted to get your take on that. Is there anything to this party outside of MAGA? Is there a Republican Party that has like some moderates and some MAGA, or has it just become strictly MAGA among those who are running the show?
I hope so in the state of Mississippi, because probably a third of your and my friends who were Democrats when you were elected are now Republicans.
Well,
I would hope they're not MAGA Republicans, but some of them sound like. And when you were talking about people, about Lindsey Graham and how he seems to be such a chameleon, hell, I got Democrats who act like that. I mean, people have gotten to the point they think that being elected is about expediency. Unlike Lindsey Graham, who's a deal maker, who worked across the aisle, who actually, I heard, who was it, Senator Booker talk about how many things they worked on together. We got too many people who have become what Lindsey Graham became, and that is a person that just capitulated to leadership. No matter how bad an idea they had, I'm just going to go along with them because I need them to be happy with me and happy for me and give me anything I ask for. And we got too much of that. And it's not just Republicans and Democrats. Look at John Fetterman, national. I got to serve with some of these people. I don't want to call any names, but I got people that I serve with in the legislature who are Democrats who literally vote against their own interests.
Yeah. Well, that's why it's good to talk to you, because what you're reminding me of is that, the Republican Party as it currently exists is primarily MAGA, but that impulse towards just kind of political expediency is not, they don't own that one. There's a lot of that in politics, and it's cheapened it. It's part of the reason that people have lost some confidence in the process. I mean, and it's not just limited to one or two figures.
I understand the apathy that we have in our communities and in our state and nationally. Why people don't think it makes any sense to vote. It's a waste of time. Everybody wants low-hanging fruit. Everybody wants to do what's easy. People get elected and they enjoy the pageantry of being elected and stop thinking about the things that people need you to do. People don't elect you to police girls and boys' bathrooms. They don't elect you to figure out what a woman wants to do with her body. I'm telling you, I'm talking about Republicans. Everybody talks about pro-life and they believe in that, but they didn't elect us to do that. We took on that because it was something that was red meat and you could get people fired up. But let me tell you, every time, and I'm talking about a person that's been elected for 30 years. When I talk to people, white, black, Republican, and Democrat, they want to talk about in Natchez, Morgantown Road. They want to talk about their roads and their bridges. They want to talk about their hospital that's about to close and why we don't have any doctors in town anymore. They want to talk about where my kid goes to school, there are tiles hanging out of the ceiling. You finally got his teachers, but there's an infrastructure problem in public education. And people want you to hire public safety people and first responders who are good at what they do and believe in what they do. But the only way you get there is you got to pay it. It gets so frustrating. Thank you for your service. Why the hell did you vote against his raise? That's what we do. And so we've lost sight of what our real mission is. And that's why I do things like this. That's why I'm still there. That's why I still am passionate about the things I want to see happen in the state of Mississippi. Because this is a beautiful state. And we still are one of the most pristine places you can live in this country. And so we can do a lot of good if we would stop being selfish, stop being lazy, and stop trying to look for the quickest route to whatever it is we're trying to achieve.
Well, you got some steam out.
Yeah, I got it.
You get
that
more of that first episode in the books.
I'm 20 pounds lighter.
Well, look, thank you, Robert.
Thank you.
And thanks to folks who are listening to us, however you found us. If you like this episode, give it a 5-star rating. That's the kind of thing you say.
Yeah.
On your podcast app. Also, you can subscribe, so make sure and do that. You can find the show all over social media. You might not find me and Robert all over social media, but you can find the show. We're lucky. Y'all Ain't Right is produced by the talented Emily Henderson. Thank you, Emily.
Thank you, Emily.
Sponsored by the fine folks at Chisholm Strategies. You can send ideas or complaints to hello@y'allain'trightpod.com. We're going to be back Wednesday. Tell you what else you need to know. Thank you.
Thank you.